What's up, guys? Tommy Bowyer here from Movie Rewind, and welcome back to the History of Comic Book Film series. Today, we'll be talking about the Golden Age, a period from 2015 to the present day. So, without further ado, let's get into it.
Hey.
And I am joined by Matthew Cholerton, who's a long-time person on the channel.
Hello, my name's Matthew, or MLC. I'm the person who does some things on the channel. You might have seen me, you might have not. Yeah.
Yes, Matthew has been involved on the channel, usually in sketches and special videos that we do, big productions and stuff like that, if you can call them big productions, but they're
Yes.
kind of called productions. If you've actually been following this channel for a while, you might know we did a discussion last year, something we wanted to do regularly, but it just never happened because we never really had the time. However, I've brought Matthew on to talk about this in this video because this is a part. I've been doing this series for nearly a year now, and I feel that this section is a very important section because obviously what many will consider as the golden age of comic book films. It's where comic book films are really reach in their prime. They're in their prime. There's at least 5 or 6 sometimes being released every year. And I thought I'd bring Matthew on because he knows a fair bit about this period as well, because he's seen all of the Marvel films and that. So,
Yes.
anyway.
It's a fun fact.
Starting off.
It's a fun fact, might I add. If this period of comic book films was the period where I actually got Tommy into comic book films.
Yes, that is very true. The first comic book, well, the first Marvel. I've enjoyed comic book films,
Yeah.
like
In terms of this
SpiderMan
period,
stuff,
I mean.
the Batman films, all that. But Matthew took me to see on his birthday Iron Man 3
Yes.
in cinemas back in 2013.
I showed you a bunch at
And
home.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. And when I got home, I started ordering first the Iron Man trilogy, then just every MCU film. And for personally speaking, because a lot of people would say, when did the golden era start? When did it start taking? And I've put it as 2015 because that's when Avengers Age of Ultron came out, which was kind of the near enough, and Ant-Man, that was near enough the conclusion of Phase 2. And in 2016, Phase 3 started with Captain America Civil War. And since then, I mean, especially throughout Phase 3, there's just been this constant explosion of really successful, financially and critically successful comic book films. I mean, I don't know about you. I've said it starts about Avengers Age of Ultron because that's kind of when loads of people were starting to see comic book films, and there was a lot more films coming out to do with comic book films. I'd say Phase 3 in particular is when they've really been up there as like some of the main films of the year.
I would say since like the back end of Phase 2, well, obviously they've been keep growing and growing and growing, but to the point where we're at Avengers Endgame and the amount of money that movie made. I'd say like in terms of peak popularity, of course the original Avengers film did do a lot. In terms of like pop culture and stuff like that, like I say like end Phase 2 because we had like Guardians of the Galaxy that really like brought us something different and really pushed that sort of genre of the MCU into, I don't know how could I say it, like into the mainstream, should I say?
Well, I'd say that Phase 1 and Phase 2 are filled with, there are exceptions, they're filled with what I would consider kind of lower MCU films. Iron Man 2, the first two, 4 films, The Incredible Hulk, for example. They're filmed with films like that, which are good films, do not get me wrong, but they're not in the same league as some of the other films.
Oh, no.
No, I'd say since Avengers Age of Ultron, there's been this steady rise in kind of the quality of Marvel films. Starting with Avengers Age of Ultron, there's been that steady rise in the quality. Too, as you said, we got to Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, blew audiences away with just how great they were as films.
And also how what we saw with Marvel Studios as well, in terms of like the back end of Phase 2 and Phase 3, was Disney and the executives, they learnt to finally entirely sort of back off and give Marvel Studios complete free reign to do what they want. Because you saw even like part of Phase 1 early stages of Phase 2, we saw there was reports that Disney did get involved quite a bit, especially Iron Man 2, because they wanted to try and shoehorn a bit of, advertisement for the Avengers into Iron Man 2. But I think they've learnt now to give Marvel Studios as a separate entity free reign, and they've really been able to, go overboard with what they've been doing.
Because I've reviewed Iron Man 2, and I said that's the closest Marvel ever got to having just like a trailer, just like a film setting up other MCU films. And there's none of that in Phase 3. However, I will say that one main component of Phase 3 is, of course, Joss Whedon directed Avengers Age of Ultron.
Yeah.
A lot of people say that film actually broke him, that he refused to do any more Marvel films after that because he felt so much pressure doing that film. And that's when Anthony and Joe Russo kind of started being the architects of Phase 3 a lot more and planning all these things. And I think we should offer them a lot of gratitude for Phase 3 because they planned it since like Captain America Civil War, and then they had Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. So they were kind of the architects, and even though they weren't the directors on every film, of course there have been other directors.
They had a lot of influence
3.
to shape the overall arc of Phase 3 of Kevin Feige.
Yeah. And they've although speaking of directors, going into directors, I'd say Phase 3 has had a lot more strong directors in it than Phase 1 and Phase 2. I mean, you've had James Gunn, of course, with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, kind of having more control over the Guardians franchise with that.
Well, so, you saw that they put James Gunn in the creative position, in charge of all the creative positions of the MCU films, in outer space. Like James Gunn was given that role to see all that creative process through, so there's continuity as well.
Yeah. Because Disney aren't stupid. Guardians of the Galaxy, I don't think Disney were expecting a lot from that because very, very at the time, no one had ever heard of Guardians of the Galaxy. So they thought, well, this is just like kind of a slot. If we were just going to fill this slot, basically. And it exploded. I mean, James Gunn blew audiences away with just how great he could make a film like. So they've basically given him full control over the Guardians franchise as well. As you said, a lot of control over all MCU films set in space and that. James Gunn has quite a lot of influence over that. So I'd say Marvel Phase 3 really it's raised the game in terms of comic book film.
Yeah.
Of course, there have been periods where comic book films, and I've discussed them in previous installments of the series, I've talked periods where comic book films really did take off. The difference is this period, because we've never seen something like the MCU before. There's never been a cinematic universe. Everything's always been self-contained. People can't just see one and then not see the others. They have to see the others in order to connect the dots. And that's what's happened with these films. They've all had to just connect the dots. And last thing I'm going to say, because I'm saying a lot, you said Disney gave a lot more control to Marvel, basically let Marvel do their own thing. And we really noticed, especially in the golden era, that several other studios have really struggled to let creators just carry on their own things. I mean, look what happened look what happened with Sony and the SpiderMan series. That all came to an end.
Well,
however,
with studio interruption, if I just add, we were meant to originally look at how Spider-Man 3 ended, and also we were meant to get a Sam Raimi Spider-Man 4, but due to studio interference, he quit.
Yes, Sony have caused the collapse of several Spider-Man films. Spider-Man 4, of course, they planned their own Spider-Man cinematic universe, where Sinister
that failed dramatically,
and even the Aunt May movie, because everyone wants to see a beautiful film.
Yeah.
However, I would say that Sony have started because they didn't give the rights. A lot of people say they gave to Marvel. No, they didn't give the rights back to Marvel. No. They signed a business agreement, so Marvel can use Spider-Man and its characters, but it has to all be agreed with Sony.
Yeah.
And a lot of the money goes to Sony rather than Marvel.
Yes.
That's what Sony want. The difference is that Sony have started releasing Venom, Morbius, spin-off films in the Spider-Man universe, which no one knows if they're set in the MCU or set apart, because no one really says. They're kind
I
of.
think the whole thing with Sony at the moment, they want to try and do the multiverse, so that's how they're going to probably tie things in.
Yes, and I'd say that's one thing with the golden era comic book films.
Yeah.
There's a massive part of it now is on this multiverse idea, because from a studio point of view, it's a brilliant idea, because you can make so many films which will generate a lot of money if they're done correctly. The difference is if they are not done correctly, and of course, while Marvel have been going above and beyond during this, DC have really struggled to get their cinematic universe off the ground. Of course, I have called this the golden era primarily because of Marvel films, DC, Batman versus Superman, Justice League. Films like that have really struggled to capture audiences the same way the MCU.
Oh, yeah.
And there's numerous reasons for that, which we won't go into fully here. Of course, studio interference.
Just one thing to link back to the DCEU, like you said about Marvel, about how they had a story now about people had to go watch them to connect all the dots, and Marvel thought it through, so it was an overall story arc. So like there was continuity in the universe. Like the problem with like the DC trying to do their own DCEU was that it wasn't thought through. Like Marvel's like they think their movies through like 10 years in advance. Like I know Kevin Feige said he's already planned out the next 10 years of Marvel films. The DCEU, that's sort of like they were just trying to do it as they went along, and well, as we saw, the DCEU failed, especially when we got to Justice League.
Yeah. And what are DCEU doing now? Well, of course, they had a lot after Justice League. There was numerous changes in how they were operating, and now they're all kind of they're releasing semi-connected films. They're not really connected. They're not really going towards a large narrative.
No,
and DC are doing something. While I think the DCU is gone, they're still using characters from the DCU. Of course, we've seen that with Harley Quinn and Birds of Prey, Shazam. They are still using characters which they're saying are connected to the DCU. The difference being that, as you've said, I don't think now they're trying to create a team-up film anymore. They're kind of just trugging along with loads of films and just hoping a few of them are hit. And that's even though this golden era has mostly been about cinematic universes and Marvel and all, there have been small solo outings and independent comic book films in between. Of course, 2017 Logan, fantastic film, which is not really connected to any. It's kind of its own film. It's not building up anything else, just its own film. And of course, I think a film which is going to really influence comic book films in the future is Joker, released last year.
Like the thing is with DC and Warner Brothers, they initially didn't want to class it as a DC film. Like the DC was not mentioned anywhere within this film when it was launched, and now they're called now that they saw box office success and critical acclaim with this movie, so they're calling it now the DC Black Label to try and do more. More like edgier stories.
I think that's. I always think DC are a lot better with darker characters. They work a lot better with that, and I think people are getting a bit fatigued with Marvel, and they're getting a bit fatigued with Marvel because the majority of the time, and that's one of the downfalls of Marvel, it's the same tone. There's a very jokey atmosphere. It's quite colourful. It's not really very dark. So there's the same tone. I think DC could really home in on the more darker films, and of course we've seen darker comic book films before. However, Joker was very different because it was not designed for kids to watch. Marvel, a lot of kids are marketed towards kids.
Oh, they make
Joker,
so much money from
no
toys.
way. Joker was an adult comic
Yeah.
book film, and I think we're going to see a lot more of films like that marketed towards more adult comic book fans, these fans who have grown up with the MCU. I mean, let's face it, I watched when the MCU started, we were both 7 or 8 years old,
Yeah.
and we're now in our late teens. So for all those fans, I think they're going to start making darker comic book films to kind of take over from something to move on to, basically.
Yeah.
I'm really happy with the Golden Age. I think it's a great time to be into comic books and comic book film, no doubt. And while a lot of ages have their kind of eras, of course, in the 80s there was a lot of slasher and horror films coming out and stuff like that. This is definitely the age of comic book films. Yeah. There's no denying that, because as I said, they're the most successful films being released. They're the flagship films that studios release every year. Do I think it's going to last? Nothing lasts forever.
Yeah.
There's already fatigue, and certainly since Avengers Endgame's been released.
Oh yeah, definitely.
There's been a decline in kind of some of the. I mean, you might disagree. I personally think since Avengers Endgame was like the pinnacle of the Golden Age.
Yeah.
I think it's in a slow decline now. There seems to be less enthusiasm for comic book films.
I suppose when you get to a certain point, like Avengers Endgame's like meant to be the biggest thing. Like you can't really, people are probably thinking like, where can you go from here? When like Avengers Endgame, this was like the culmination of all the films, and this was like the grand like finale in a sense of everything that's been. So people think, how can you like go bigger from here? How can you go better from here?
I can see why Marvel are doing. So Marvel seem to be kind of not resetting it, but kind of reshaping the MCU. Of course, as you said, 10 years of build, and Avengers Endgame was like, whoa, like that was the pinnacle. That was the pinnacle. What we're seeing now is that slow. And of course, there are still good Marvel films. Of course, SpiderMan.
Oh yeah, I loved Homecoming. That was brilliant. Homecoming was brilliant. Far From Home was even better. I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, and of course, Black Widow is being released in May. That looks like a decent film at the moment. So I think Marvel are fine. I think the comic book films will continue. I think this golden age will continue for a couple more years. However, I do think we're in the declining phase now. I don't think there's going to be this kind of resurgence again. However, comic book films have gone up and down before. There's been really good periods and then really bad periods.
Yeah.
It kind of just depends what audiences want. However, eventually they are going to ideas. MCU especially will run out of ideas one day on what they're going to do. So, final thoughts, great time to be alive in the golden age. It really is. However, what we can learn from this is that one day we're probably in the decline. We're in the declining period now.
Yeah.
How long that will take, who knows? But I'd say we're definitely in the decline.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say I possibly agree with you when you say decline. I'm not going to come out and say we're in the decline stage just yet, because it remains to be seen just how the films and general audience is going to feel, because it's all good us lot saying what we think, but it remains to be seen just what everyone thinks. So that's going to shine through with box office results or critical reviews and stuff like that. It remains to be seen, though. I do agree, Tommy, it's possible that we are going to decline, and interest in the whole comic book films are going to slowly just start. I'm not going to say fade away, but just dial back a bit, I'd say.
Well, yeah, obviously. I mean, if horror films were massive in the 80s, horror films still get released now. Yeah. They just don't get the same buzz generated that they used to. So there'll still probably be comic book films being released. I just don't think they'll be the big showpieces which they are now. Yeah. You know, they won't be the front page of all of they won't be, if you go into a cinema, they won't be the main poster in the middle of the hall. There'll be like a smaller post,
Maybe in 10 years'
just
time,
like on the
possibly I
other
could see that
side.
happening.
Yeah, I think I agree with you entirely. The golden age is, I say the golden age is nearing the end of its phase, but while it's still here, it's a good time. It's a good time to enjoy these films. It's
Yes.
a really good time to. So anyway, I think that is it from us
Yeah,
today.
I think that's it. Yeah.
So thanks for watching, guys. I really enjoyed this video. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe in order to receive great and maybe even improved quality content in the future. And also let us know in the comments if you watch this video whether you like discussions like this or you want to see more discussions like this, because it's something that we could potentially do if this
Yeah, we
one
could do
gets
it more often.
good. Yeah, it's if it gets more feedback, because we did do one, but then we just stopped doing it for a long time. And I will especially see you in another one, and I'm sure Matthew will as well.
Soon.
I'd like to thank him for being in this video.
Yeah.
So we will see.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, we'll see everyone soon.
Yep. See ya.
Bye.